Hello my gorgeous friends of Webflow, I'm Francesco, and if you don't know who am I, well, in this channel we do Webflow things and we make them simple and accessible to everybody from time to time by using a whiteboard. In today's video and in the next one, we are going to build a rotating grid gallery that will look like this. What are the most relevant things about this animation? Well, it happens on scroll. The orientation of all the videos doesn't change even if their container is rotating. 3, well, yes, I've used videos of Japanese bands or singers, but I can really help it. And 4, everything has been built without using code at all. It's just Webflow interactions here. But now let's take a look at our whiteboard. Now we are going to start with our usual setup, so a section and a main container just to keep things more organized, but our component will be built upon a div that we can call film. Why film? Because as we said, this animation is going to happen on scroll, so we can think of this div as, and by the way, we're going to apply an on-scroll animation on this film div. We can think of it as kind of a cinematographic film that we will move to play the animation. So for this reason, the main property of this div will be the height. The more the height, the longer the animation will last, or the slower it will be played. Inside our film, we will put a div that we can call camera. Why camera? Because just like a cinematographic camera, it will always be looking at our grid component. And for this reason, its main property will be position with a value of sticky, because we want it to be anchored at the top. And because we want our experience to take up all the available space inside the viewport, we are going to set its width to 100% and its height to 100 VH. And because we are going to rotate our grid and this could cause overflowing issues, well, to avoid that, we are going to set the overflow property on the camera to hidden, just to avoid those horizontal scrolling issues that could happen. Now, let's stop talking and let's go right into Webflow for step 1. And there we go, first part of our build. We already have our basic setup, so a section and a main container, and we are going to add a combo class, let's call it CC grid component, to our main container because we want to get rid of this horizontal padding, because we don't want our component to be squeezed as we squeeze the viewport, and we are also going to set its maximum width to none because we don't want our component to be limited in width. And now we can add our film, so a div block with a class of film, and because we already set it, we are going to apply the wall scrolling animation to this container. Its main property will be the height. The more the height, the more the animation will last. I will set this to 500 VH, but of course, you can choose whatever value you want. And now inside our film, we can add our camera. And again, because this camera will always be looking to our grid gallery, we want it to be sticky, and we will also set its top offset to 0. And because we want our experience to take up the whole viewport, we are going to set the width to 100% and a height to 100 VH. And to center everything inside our camera, we will set the camera display property to flex, align center, justify center, and remember one last thing, because we are going to rotate our grid gallery and this could cause overflow, we are going to set the overflow property of the camera to hidden. And yes, that's it for part 1. Now let's go back to the whiteboard and let's start with part 2. And now time for step 2, building the skeleton of our structure. Now there are probably billions of layouts that we could use to build an animation like this, but I'm going to show you the one that I'm using because I think it's quite general and it will be helping us a lot to achieve that kind of broken grid layout that you saw in the preview of the animation. Now everything will be built upon grids and we'll start from our actual component, which will be a grid with 2 columns. Now, in the column on the left, we are going to throw what we will call block 1 and block 3. And in the column on the right, we are going to throw block 2. All these blocks are just grids. Block 1 will be a grid with 2 columns and 2 rows, block 3 a div with 2 columns, and block 2 a grid with 2 rows. Inside these blocks, we are going to add what we will call video wrappers, which will host the actual video elements. And in order to achieve, by the way, our video wrappers are the elements that are highlighted in green here, so we will have 8 of them. And to achieve this broken grid layout, we will be playing mainly with the align property and distribute property of our grids. And one thing to notice is that, because remember, we want our experience to take up all the space available inside our viewport, we're going to use VH units, mostly to compute the size of the video wrappers and to set the gap property of our grids. Because this, we will see that in Webflow, will help us a lot with calculations. And now, yeah, that's it. We are done with step 2, and it's time to jump right into Webflow to build it together. And there we go with part 2. Let's build a skeleton of our structure. Now we can finally add our component inside our camera, and this component will just be a grid with 2 columns. So let's get rid of 1 row, and let's also set the width of both columns to auto and the gap between 2 columns to 1 VH, because we already said that we are going to use VH throughout the whole build, and this will help us a lot with calculations. So now inside our component, we will throw a div, and this will be our component block group, our first column on the left. And this column will just be a grid with 2 rows. So let's get rid of 1 column. Let's also set the width of this column to auto, and let's set the gap between the 2 rows to 1 VH. And inside our component block, we are going, or block group, we are going to add our first actual block. So component block 1, and this block 1 will be a grid with 2 columns and 2 rows. Let's also set the width of the 2 columns to auto and the gap between both the columns and the rows to 1 VH. And because we will want our content to be pushed toward the center, we will also need to set to align children to the bottom and to the right. And now let's add our component block 3. It's block 3 and not block 2 because I'm kind of counting clockwise. So this will be the first one, this the second, and this the third. And this component block 3 will just be a grid with 2 columns. So let's get rid of 1 row. Let's set the width of both columns to auto and the gap between the 2 columns to 1 VH. And we will also need to distribute the content to the right based on the layout that I'm using. So yeah, if yours is different, you might need to tweak a few things, but yeah, this is the general idea. And now inside our component, we can finally add our block 2. And our block 2, we will just be a grid with 2 rows. So let's get rid of 1 column. Let's also set the width of the column to auto and the gap between the 2 rows to 1 VH. And we will need to distribute the children towards, or align the content towards the center. And yep, that's it for part 2. And now back to the whiteboard, and where we will add elements and finish up the structure. And we are now arrived at step 3, add elements to our structure. Now, because we've already talked about the general layout that we are using, we've already talked a bit about our video wrappers, we are just going to focus on one of them for the sake of simplicity. And now the main concept here is that Because we are going to put inside our video wrappers videos that are bigger in size than their corresponding parent, and that's why here it seems that the video is the actual wrapper, but lucky for us we are using a meaningful naming convention. And by the way, we will see why the video needs to be bigger than its parent in the next and final step. The main property for our video wrappers will be the display property, and we are going to set it to flex and align and justify everything to the center. And also, because the video will be bigger than its parent, we are going to set the overflow property on the video wrappers to hidden. And because we've already seen that because all the video wrappers will have different sizes, we are going to assign a different combo class to each of them, just to set a different size for each of the video wrappers. As for the video that we are going to throw inside the video wrappers, the main property will be the flex child sizing property, and we are going to set it to don't shrink nor grow, because otherwise our video will try to fit inside its parent and we don't want it to happen. And again, because our videos will have a different size based on the size of the corresponding parent, we are going to use a different combo class on each of the videos. Now, how can we compute the size of each video based on the corresponding parent? Well, we will see it a bit more in detail in the next and final step, but even if you're not interested in knowing how, well, we will see that in Webflow. I will provide you with a easy to use tool to compute the size of the video, which by the way will be a square, based on the width and the height of its parent video wrapper. And now we are done with step 3. Now let's jump again right into Webflow. And there we go, part 3. Let's finally add elements to our structure and start seeing something. So the first step here is adding our video wrappers to the structure, and we can do this by selecting, for example, our component block 1 and adding a div, and this will be our component video wrapper. Now we said that the main concept here is that because the background videos that we are going to add will be bigger than the corresponding parent, and we will see later why. And we also want these background videos to be centered inside their corresponding parent. We want these video wrappers to have a display property of flex, align center, justify center, and we also need to set the overflow property to hidden so that the background videos that we are going to put inside won't overflow. And I will also add a border radius of 1 rem, but yeah, this is just my personal preference and is totally optional. So now we just need to duplicate this a bunch of times just to fill up the entire structure. And there we go. Now, because our video wrappers will generally have different sizes, we are also going to add to each of them a different combo class. So this one will be our CC combo class 1, this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and finally 8. And now, how do we do the actual calculation? I mean, we said that we want our experience to take up the entire viewport height, but now how can we set the height of this video wrapper so that we can just leave one VH gap here at the very top and one VH gap here at the very bottom? Well, the actual calculation is pretty simple because we can just make sure that this one VH gap plus the height of this video wrapper plus this gap, remember, is 1 VH plus the height of this video wrapper plus this gap of 1 VH plus the height of this video wrapper plus this 1 VH gap at the very bottom. all these values add up to 100, and you can choose whatever values you want if they just match this requirement. And these are the values that I used. So the first component video wrapper, for the first one I used 25 VH for both the width and the height. For the second one I used 32 VH for both the width and height. For the third one I used 42 VH for the width and 32 VH for the height. Then for the fourth one I used 32 VH for both the width and the height. And then for the seventh one I used again 32 VH for both the width and a height. For the eighth one I used 25 VH for the width, 25 VH for the height. And for the fifth one I used 32 VH for the width, 50 VH for the height. And for the sixth one I used 25 VH for the width and 25 VH for the height. And we can see that if we select our component and we try to, I don't know, say its background color to red, we can see that it's taking up the entire space inside our viewport, and we are just leaving this one VH gap at the very top and one VH gap at the very bottom. So let's just reset the background color, and now it's time to add the actual background videos to our structure. So we can select, for example, the very first video wrapper, and we can throw in a background video, and this will be our component video. And now the key thing here, before setting the actual width and height, or actually computing the actual width and height for this component video, is we need to set under flex child, we need to set the sizing property to don't grow nor shrink, because we said these background videos will be bigger than their parent. So this means that if we don't set the sizing property to don't grow nor shrink, they will try to fit the size of their parent, and we don't want this to happen. And now, just to see something inside the screen, for the time being, let's set both the width and the height to 100%. But of course, we are going to change these values. And we also don't want this play pause button here, so let's just uncheck this option. And now we can start by copy pasting this component video inside each component video wrapper. So let's do this. And there we go. Now, because this component video will of course have generally a different size, we are going to add a combo class on top of this component video, just like we did before. So this one will have a combo class of CC1, this will be our CC2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, how do we compute the size of the background video, of each background video? We will see that later when we are going to talk about, when we will talk about the actual animation. But even if you're not interested in that, well, along with this tutorial, I will provide you with a clonable, and inside this clonable, you will find a form. We can just fill this form to compute a value, and this value, we will use this value for both the width and the height of our background videos, because at the very end, our background videos will just be squares. And here, we just need to set the width of the background video container, so our video wrapper, and here we need to set the height. We need to put the height of the background video container, so our video wrapper. And yeah, now we will do this for just the very first element. Then I will pause the video. I will do that for all the elements inside our structure, and I will also upload the actual videos so that we can start working on the actual animation. So the very first element, the very first video wrapper, has a width of 25 VH and a height of 25 VH. So we need to set both the width and the height of the corresponding background video to 35.36 VH. And so let's do this. Let's just copy paste the value here. VH. And that's it for the very first element. Now, yeah, as I said, I'll do that for all the elements, upload the videos, and get back to you. And I'm back. So as you can see, I've uploaded here all the background videos. I've also set up the sizes of all our videos, and now we are ready to go back to the whiteboard for the very final step, which is building the animation. And there we go. Step 4, the final step, building the animation. And after we understand a key concept here, and I will do my best to explain it to you, we will see that the animation, I would say, is pretty easy to build. And we said that we are going to build an animation that plays on scroll, and we are going to apply the corresponding interaction to the film element. That's why inside Webflow we are going to choose a while scrolling type of interaction, and we are going to focus on just two keyframes, 0% and 100%, and we are going to target just two types of elements, our component and our videos. We are going to act on properties like for our component, like opacity, scale, blur, and rotation. And as for our videos, we are targeting rotation, transform. Now, why do we need to target the actual rotation of our videos? Well, let's try to take these two boots. They have the exact same size, and I don't know, this is the video wrapper and this is the video. Now, if we rotate our video wrapper, and the video wrapper is rotating because our entire component is rotating, well, the video will rotate with its parent, with the video wrapper. And that's why, because we want to build an animation where the video has always the exact same orientation, if we rotate the video wrapper, this should be, I guess, clockwise, we need to rotate the video counterclockwise so that he always keeps the original orientation. But now, why the video needs to be bigger than its parent? Let's try to understand this simple drawing, even though I am very bad at drawing. Now, the one highlighted in black is the video wrapper. The one highlighted in green is the actual video, and inside this drawing they have the exact same size. We said that if the video wrapper is rotating clockwise, the video needs to rotate counterclockwise, but this would lead in a situation like this where we have these dark areas, and we would end up in a situation where the rectangle would look like a weird polygon instead of a perfect rectangle. That's why it needs to be bigger, so that these dark areas are filled by the video. But how much bigger? So with a bit of math, we could demonstrate that it's sufficient for our video to be a square with the side equal to the diagonal of the corresponding video wrapper. But lucky for us, as we've just seen, I will provide you with a tool to compute the size of the video based on its parent, so you don't have to worry at all about math. But yeah, that's it. We are finally done with step 4, and for the very last time, let's jump right into Webflow and let's build this animation together. And there we go, step 4, building the animation inside Webflow. Now that we also know the concepts behind this whole animation, building it will be way easier. Now, we said that we first need to add a while scrolling interaction to our film wrapper. And so let's add one. So while scrolling in view, play scroll animation. And now what values we have to set? Now we want our animation to start when the element is fully visible, because we need to wait, or we want to wait for our grid component to be fully visible inside the viewport. And we also want to end the animation when the element is fully invisible, but we are going to add an offset. Now, what value might we choose for the offset? We could use a bit of math to determine a reasonable value, but we would end up tweaking it anyway based on the smoothing of our animation. So I would suggest to stick with this 50% and then tweak it based on your personal preference. Now, what values for the smoothing? I would like this animation to be quite smooth, so I will go for a value of 93%. And now let's build the actual animation. We said that we want to target just 2 keyframes, the 0% and 100% keyframes. And the first thing that we are going to do is selecting our component and targeting the scale transform. So I used a value of 0.4 for the 0% keyframe and a value of 1 for 100%. Now we can address the opacity, and for the opacity I used a value of 30% on the 0% keyframe and 100% on the 100% keyframe. And now we can target the rotation. So transform rotate, we will go from 0 around the Z axis to minus 180 again around the Z axis. And now we can target the blur. So let's search for filter here. Let's add a blur filter, and we will go from 11 pixels to 0. Now if we try to preview the animation, we will see that everything is working fine, but all the videos are not keeping the initial orientation because we are missing our essential step. We need to select one of our component video and target its rotate transform. But now pay attention here, because it says class component video CC1. So we are targeting all the elements that have the component video class plus the CC-1 combo class applied. But we want to target all the elements with the component video class on them. So here, all the elements that have the original class. We don't care about the actual combo class. So here we just need to click and type component underscore video and look for the right label. There we go. Only children with this class is fine, and we need to go from 0 to, because we need to kind of counter rotate these elements. Here for the component we used minus 180, so here on the component video we will go from 0 to 180. And that's it. If we preview the animation here, we can see that the background videos are keeping the original orientation, and this is even more visible if we go to preview mode, wait for the video to load, start scrolling, and we can see that they are keeping the original orientation. And that's it. We are done. Thanks so much everybody for watching this video, and if you liked it, well, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any suggestions or want to share thoughts or things I might improve, well, feel free to throw a comment down below. And in the description of this video you will be able to find a link to a clonable that you can use to play around with this animation, and where you will be also able to find a tool to compute the size of the videos. And before I forget, yeah, as usual, my weekly recommendation is a song from a Japanese band. They are called Red Wimps and the song is called Nandemonaya, and I'll put a link in the description down below. So, see you next time. Ja, mata ne!